Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you all here today. Before I start, let me tell you a few words about myself. I am Olha Gerasimenko. I am an assistant of the Department of Foreign Philology, Ukrainian Studies and Social and Law Disciplines of Mikhailo Tugan-Baranovsky, Donetsk National University of Economics and Trade. The theme of our presentation is interpretation of the novel Across the River and Into the Trees in terms of means of emotionality expression. Cognitivism has recently influenced the development of domestic linguistics. All its branches, including translation studies, are subject to this influence. The cognitive concept in linguistics requires consideration of linguistic phenomena in relation to the human factor. This approach strengthens the role of interpretation significantly. Unfortunately, science still doesn't have an absolutely precise definition of the term interpretation, and therefore it is used in different meanings, sometimes as an independent linguistic unit and sometimes as a part of translation. In our research, we consider cognitive semantics as a cognitive approach to the categorization of concepts, as well as analysis of the organization of conceptual space in human consciousness, where conceptual structures are considered as carriers of basic knowledge about the world, and lexical meaning as a cognitive category. Semantics penetrates into the range of non-verbal concepts. In particular, in cognitive semantics, such are the concepts. Concept is a term that is a means of explaining the units of mental resources of our consciousness and the information structure that reflects the knowledge and experience of man. Concepts arise in the process of constructing information about objects and their properties, allowed to preserve knowledge about the world, are the building blocks of the conceptual system. In our work, we use the term interpretation in the meaning of research activities related to the interpretation of the semantic side of a literary work at its various structural levels through the correlation with the integrity of a higher level. The subject of our interest is the interpretation of emotionality. Emotions are one of the forms of reflection of the realities of life. They are multifaceted because they comprise feelings and experiences, physiology and behavior, forms of cognition and conceptualization. They comprise different phenomena, emotional reactions and emotional states. Emotions are a necessary and inevitable form of cognition of objective reality. Linguists consider the linguistic embodiment of emotionality in terms of dividing it into two groups: the language of description of emotions and the language of expression of emotions. Terminologically, these layers of vocabulary are distinguished by two functional types: vocabulary of emotions and emotional vocabulary. The vocabulary of emotions has a nominative function, and emotional vocabulary performs expressive and pragmatic functions. The concept of emotional means is associated with the category of emotionality, the external actualization of emotions. Manifestations of numerous emotions by various means in language are in fact communicative functions of these means. The relevance of the study is determined by the need to understand clearly the concept and role of emotionality in the linguistics of the text. We consider it necessary to address the issue of interpretation of the literary text in the language of translation and, in particular, to the interpretation of emotionality. The purpose of this article is to clarify the essence of the concept of emotional lexical units and identify the peculiarities of their translation into Ukrainian on the example of Hemingway's novel Across the River and Into the Trees and its Ukrainian translation performed by Sukhenko and Tarasenko. In order to be able to translate appropriately, it's necessary to analyze the style of the writer. The obvious requirements for the style are specificity, avoidance of excessive descriptiveness, simplicity, and conciseness. They are obviously connected with emotionality. Hemingway's prose is restrained, tender, and very economical. His lexical means of emotiveness expressing are contextual, or rather, it's a complex combination of seemingly simple but extremely saturated implicit syntactic construction with emotional vocabulary represented primarily by adjectives, nouns, particles, exclamations, contextually implicit tokens, vocabulary of low style, and a few phrases and other tropes. All this is quite true about his work across the river and into the trees. Let's study several examples. The text is characterized by a high frequency of adjective using. Let's study some examples. It was a lovely double. Literal vision was just a condensation of flat, low country in the winter. In all these examples, adjectives have a bright emotional coloring. With help of these adjectives, the writer implicitly expresses feelings of satisfaction, dissatisfaction, respect, irony, disgust, admiration, and so on. Not only adjectives, but also nouns and verbs have an emotional function in the text. Here are some examples. Get you back in it, jerk, he said in English. He is a big brute too. The hell with him. Highlighted nouns and verbs are used to objectify emotions in the language, as well as to perform pragmatic and expressive functions. They evaluate, express imagery, saturate the text with the expressiveness. Emotionality always have modal verbs. They are already emotional in nature, and negative particles. Every time you shoot now can be the last shoot, and no stupid son of a bitch should be allowed to ruin it. The modal verb can and the negative participle no are distinctly expressive. Modality conveys emotions of uncertainty, doubtfulness, and related sadness. The negative particle expresses the expressive intention to keep the desired positive emotions from the hunt. Analyzing across the river and into the trees, we also came across a large number of epithets. They have different effective evaluations, but as it is always in Hemingway's works, they are relevant, expressive, and accurate. For example, I worked like a horse coming out here. The use of epithets is intended only to reflect the attitude of the author or hero to a particular person or event. All epithets have emotional and reinforcing meaning. The result is that everything related to the epithets in the text is extremely bright and emphatically rich. Such an element of the emotional vocabulary layer as exclamations is also presented in the text. A particularly striking feature of exclamations is semantic irradiation, the ability to turn the most neutral sentence into a bright emotional one, only due to the presence of an exclamation in the sentence. Let's study the examples of exclamations usage in the text. All right, city boy, you'll never know. Expressive exclamation city boy belongs to the vocabulary of substandard conversational style. Its use is intended to convey the closeness of relationships between old acquaintances. Other tropes used in the text add emotionality to the story as well. These combinations and words have a double emotional and subject logical meaning. Their use enhances the semantics of the expression. Here are some examples from the text. He is in a beautiful mood, the shooter thought. He is a big brute too. I work like a horse coming out here. He just pulled his weight and that's all. What the hell is eating him? This is his trait, isn't it? And the last thing to pay attention to in terms of emotionality of the work is the use of barbarism. Hemingway widely uses in his works German, Italian, or Spanish words. Words of the languages he heard while he staying in these countries. The events of the novel Across the River and Into the Trees take place in Italy, hence the barbarisms used in the text are mostly Italian. Their application, firstly, gives the story a distinct local flavor, and secondly, barbarisms are implicit and emotional in nature because their semantic field is unstable. Let's study the examples of barbarisms used in the text that are of our interest. Ciao, the colonel said. The means of emotiveness is rendered specifically in different languages, thus complicating the work of translators. The English language consists of several lexical groups endowed with considerable expressive power. Such words include exclamations, epithets, a separate group consisting of words that are the names of human feelings, sensations, qualities. They have clear denotative and connotative meanings. All tropes, modal verbs, are endowed with expressiveness and make language emphatic. All this is true of work across the river and into the trees. The work is typical in terms of Hemingway's style and its inherent features. From our point of view, the translation of the work by translators Suhenko and Tarasenko is quite successful. The translators managed to preserve the style of the writer. Moreover, they preserved and rendered the emotionality of the work using appropriate translation techniques, which wasn't easy given the significant differences in the means of expressing emotiveness. Our presentation is over. Thank you for listening and your attention.